Tales Up, written by Samma Lynne. Part 1, Rhapsodized by Persephone. Emma Rose sat on the edge of the stone bridge leading out of town.
Stephen was already there,
standing behind her,
telling a tale of our scuffles today that I would have rather told.
She stared across the river,
and he stared at the pale flash of thigh she showed with each kick of her leg.
And then Remy tripped onto base. Literally tripped onto third base. Got there face first.
Mm-hmm,
Emma replied.
She mumbled when
she wasn't actually listening. Stephen continued.
But hey, a base is a base, no matter how you get on it. It was almost a home run, and it got us 3 points. Bam! Suddenly we're winning.
Emma responded with another murmur.
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 She twisted a length of vine in her hand,
shaping it carefully into a circle.
But then I was up to bat.
And wouldn't you know who got a real case of Butterfingers?
Hey!
Stephen turned, the annoyance in his voice
not disrupting the smile he kept stamped on his face.
The bat clean left his hands,
I said before he could protest further.
Yeah?
She muttered,
eyes narrowing at the vine.
A few more deft twists,
and she had finished the circle.
She looked up,
eyes clear and wide as a child's again.
Hi, Remy,
she said excitedly.
Stephen was just telling me about,
She studied me for a moment.
I was at the end of miming ahead,
face comically bug-eyed
for the lack of a baseball bat.
Your baseball game today,
she concluded confidently.
It was a real doozy,
I said with a half-hearted shrug.
Emma reached down into the basket of flowers.
Yeah,
she agreed,
though her voice slurred into a mumble again.
And we lost her once more to her project.
Stephen picked the story back up, making his slip of the bat sound much more epic.
A slip of a master player who's been practicing
the dangers
too hard.
of reaching for perfection.
Oh, whoa ever was Stephen.
Emma nodded at the appropriate moments.
Her fingers looped flower stems into the vine.
And soon she had a wreath 10 times prettier
than the ones the store sold.
For 1 whole month's worth of allowance.
She held it up in front of her, scrutinizing it.
So, would you like to get milkshakes?
Stephen asked.
He had finished the tale of how he scored the last point to get us out of a draw.
Touched base on how awful it was to have homework on nights with pivotal games.
And had spent the last minute telling Emma how cute she looked in her new haircut.
Which she had gotten a week ago.
Her gaze slid over the top of the wreath to stare at Stephen.
That was an awesome game, she said with a cautious confidence.
When his brows started to furrow,
she smiled with closed lips.
The careful smile of her thinking very hard.
And that sounds great! Confidence.
Everything
was said
with confidence.
The furrow left Stephen's brow and he beamed.
Great,
he echoed.
Let's go then.
Her wide-eyed gaze slid now to me.
You agreed to get milkshakes,
I told her in a whisper,
while Stephen focused on repacking his backpack.
Oh, good. That sounds good.
She hopped off the side of the bridge to land between us.
On her knees.
Her smile went
from closed lips
to a laugh that flashed.
A full smile of teeth.
Too straight for braces,
but not straight enough for
her mother's approval.
Clenched
and careful
not to reveal
too much gum.
The skid on the concrete had hurt.
I helped her to her feet as she kept giggling.
Can we cross through the cemetery?
She asked, a hiss accenting each noise with an S,
as she kept the back of her jaw clenched from pain.
I need to leave this.
It's a shortcut, whatever,
Stephen said, finally turning around.
She nodded, now checking on her wreath.
She had scraped her wrist on the bridge instead of accidentally crushing the flowers.
Satisfied, she pulled on her bag and scrambled ahead of us,
skipping as soon as she was on dirt instead of concrete.
Did you impress her this time?
I asked, offering to take Stephen's bag.
He made sure Emma wasn't looking and handed it over, rubbing his shoulder and smiling gratefully.
He didn't say anything, even to me, but I knew he had wrenched it.
It wasn't Butterfingers that made him let go of that bat.
Of course not,
Stephen sighed.
But I think she actually heard half of it this time.
I knew it was wrong, but I didn't want to correct my brother.
I just nodded.
Our little angel wouldn't be much of an angel if she couldn't fly.
I don't like to call it flighty, even if that's what it is.
Plain and simple.
One day she'll pay attention to us more than everyone else.
I didn't believe that either.
I didn't want to believe it.
Because I knew if she did,
she'd have to pay attention to
one of us twins more than the other.
I just hope she doesn't linger in our shortcut,
Stephen continued.
The graveyard gives me the creeps, even in the broad daylight.
Just grass and caskets,
I said,
shouldering Stephen's bag more firmly over my own.
I willed myself to believe that too.
We hurried after Emma, whose skipping steps had already taken her.
Past the gates of the cemetery.
What is she doing this time?
I shrugged,
as we caught up.
I couldn't hear the usual music involved with following a smiling Emma.
The whistling that always lingered around her along the scent of flowers.
She knelt in front of a grave, gingerly placing the wreath that she had just made.
Then, without waiting for us, like she always would,
she stood and ran to the opposite side of the small graveyard.
the end of the block of hollowed dirt and restless spirits. Stephen and I shared a look and ran after,
our long legs catching us up.
to her in mere moments.
Emma stumbled out of the graveyard's other entrance and grabbed the edge of the brick wall surrounding it.
She was winded.
Red-faced.
And breathing as if,
She'd just run a marathon.
Emma?
Stephen's longer legs took him past me.
His large hands resting on her shoulders.
You okay?
Emma tried to answer.
But her breath caught in her throat and her voice died there.
She nodded enthusiastically,
A closed-lipped smile.
More open than her carefully practiced smiles.
but less so than the one that chewed gum carelessly.
Stephen shook his head,
What was that all about?
He wrapped his arm around her.
The one not injured in the game.
helping her to her feet. She gestured to the graveyard,
Then to her own throat.
And then shook her head.
still smiling with closed lips.
You, got your voice spooked out of you?
She giggled breathily and shook her head.
Hold breath in graveyard.
She gasped.
Another superstition, Emma?
I asked, taking a cautious step forward.
Emma nodded.
A normal color coming back to her flushed cheeks.
Isn't that a bit extreme?
Stephen asked.
I only hold my breath.
She took in a deep breath right on cue,
Her chest rising with the movement.
and I noticed Stephen noticing that.
If I'm in there casually.
She extracted herself from Stephen, rising her arms to make each breath easier.
I don't have to if I'm in there to work or to attend a funeral. That wasn't an official sort of visit. Emma has a lot of has-tos. She has to kiss the roof of a car if she runs a yellow light.
She has to use the same pencil for a test that she used to study.
She has to throw salt over her shoulder if she spills it.
She has to blow kisses to roadside crosses.
She has to carry an acorn with her.
A lot of cannots, too.
She cannot say goodbye to anyone while on a bridge.
She cannot leave shoes on a bed or chair.
She cannot swallow fruit seeds.
She cannot leave a house through a different door than she used to enter.
She cannot hurt a ladybug, or a spider, or a bee.
There are probably more animals than that,
Why?
I asked.
We started walking again. Sometimes she couldn't give answers.
And most of the time, the answers just didn't seem to make any more sense than the ritual.
But I always asked.
Eager for a dialogue with Emma.
Well, that's kind of a long, complicated one. Let's see.
She tapped her fingers together.
And then twisted them.
Hands anxious now.
that they held nothing.
'Cause, you see, there's a lot of parts to a graveyard and what you're supposed to do. Driving past, you should hold your breath too, but walking past, that's kind of silly. But inside, you're stepping on graves, right? And it's possible for you to breathe in a spirit that's all restless. And that'd be bad. Besides, it's rude, you know? They can't breathe, 'cause, well, they're dead, and it's just awful to breathe all on top of them. And I think they understand when you're there to visit someone and being respectful, but I don't know if they know when you're there for a different reason and still being respectful, so I figured I was probably better safe than sorry, you know?
I didn't know.
And I assumed Stephen didn't either.
But we both nodded in unison.
Anything to get another beaming smile out of Emma.